Good afternoon, all. Can I be heard? It sounds silent. I just want to make sure we're all everyone can hear me. Can someone drop a chat?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Great. So we'll start here in about a minute. Great. So looks like we've got a good number of folks here. So we'll get started. Thanks everyone for taking time out of your afternoon to join us for the pre-bid conference for our Invest Southwest Austin RFP. Going to talk about the agenda for today a little bit, and really just going to start out and introduce myself. My name is Gerardo Garcia. I'm an architect and urban designer, also the planning lead for the West Planning Region for the Department of Planning. Also joined by a number of my colleagues from the Department of Planning and the city as panelists who will be available to answer questions that come up throughout the Q&A session, and I'll be moderating that as well. Gonna give an overview of the upcoming or the RFP opportunity for Austin, and then we're gonna dedicate about an hour for Q&A. So we'll certainly have enough time to get through just about everyone's questions. Just as a heads up, if there's a question that we need to clarify or kind of finalize a response to, we will make sure to let you know that and provide that response in writing along with responses to all the questions that are going to be fielded here today. And then my colleague at DPD, Chris Jang, is going to wrap us up and talk about next steps and kind of when you can expect to see those questions and some of the other materials that we're going to review today. This presentation will also be available after today's session. So just so everyone's aware that, if you miss anything or you want to go back and revisit any of the content, you can certainly do that, as well as we're recording this session. So getting right into it, the department is really taking, the Department of Planning is taking a different approach to how we issue RFPs. And this is really the first, Austin, this RFP in particular is really the first of that series of RFPs where we're really trying to be intentional about the information that we provide as part of the RFP and the expectations that we set, as well as the amount of community engagement that we're doing as part of the RFP process. So what's typical or what's part of this RFP that's more typical is obviously we're soliciting development proposals in most cases for city-owned land. I think Austin is a little bit different in that regard. And we're also, providing the details that you might see in a typical RFP, such as, the size of parcels or zoning, their appraised value, and some indication of uses. Where we're trying to be more robust and intentional is really illustrate the desired level of urbanism that you've probably seen in some of the RFP development manuals, as well as teasing out what those preferred uses are with the community, and making sure that they're feasible, both financially, but in terms of incentives and tools that the department can bring to the table, but also in terms of their market feasibility. And so the first three RFPs, as I mentioned, so let me back up actually. The city, as many of you are aware, identified 12 commercial corridors and 10 community areas on the south and west sides. And they're illustrated in the map here. This initial set of RFPs are going to, we're looking at Austin, which we're talking about today, at basically the corner of Chicago Avenue and Laramie Avenue. We're also looking at Englewood and Auburn Gresham. And our goal really is that this is the first set of RFPs where we're looking to establish a cadence of releasing these opportunities every 3 months for the rest of the corridors, starting with these. And so just to give you a little bit more background on each of the sites, for Austin, again, we're at the intersection of Chicago Avenue and Laramie Avenue, and it includes the historic Laramie State Bank building. So it's very much an adaptive reuse proposal. In Englewood, there is more flexibility on the parcels, but we're calling it Englewood Phase 2 because there's opportunity to um, assemble some of these parcels, including the site that includes the Englewood Firehouse. And in Auburn Gresham, we're basically at the corner of 79th and Halsted. So focusing on, focusing on Austin, which is what we're here to do today. You know, the opportunity of Austin is really a site that's about 34,000 square feet. And what we've outlined in the RFP is a mixed use residential and commercial site that includes, again, the adaptive reuse of the Laramie State Bank. Um, you know, we've also in the RFP outlined existing assets and upcoming and ongoing investments in the community. One that should be interesting to note for this particular site is streetscape improvements along Chicago Avenue from essentially Austin Boulevard to Laramie. And those are funds that have been secured, and that project is being planned, and it's about a $17 million investment. And so just to give everyone a point of reference of the process of how we got to this site, um, these development scenarios were led by a pro bono consultant team through the Chicago Central Area Committee. And we looked at a number of sites along the corridor. In fact, we identified 10 along Chicago Avenue. And we really focused on three. Site 2 that you see in the aerial here, Site 7, which is the subject property, and then Site 9 as well. And look closely at each of the sites, really through the lens of looking at market area demographics and doing market analysis to ensure that what we were proposing was rooted in some sort of market reality. And looked at previous planning as well. And one of the things that we learned, particularly about Austin, is that there's enormous opportunity in the amount of retail leakage that's occurring towards the western suburbs. And then we went forward and with our pro bono consultant teams, made a series of development concepts or scenarios. And, you know, for Austin, just to give you a flavor, this is Opportunity Site 2. And again, a mixed use building with some sort of retail or community serving space on the ground floor and residential above. We also, for Opportunity Site 9, we also looked at potentially a small grocer or pharmacy, and we learned through our kind of retail and market analysis that the area could support about a 15,000 square foot retailer, again, a small grocer or pharmacy. And so really tried to look at how that would fit into context and work within the context of Chicago Avenue. But you know, we with the community, and we decided to prioritize the opportunity that we're here to talk about today, which is the RFP site at Chicago Avenue and Laramie Avenue, which is Opportunity Site 7. And again, here we integrated the existing Laramie State Bank as an opportunity for adaptive reuse, a mixed use development with retail at the ground floor, residential and potentially other kind of commercial office spaces above. Um, and one thing to note here is if you notice in the center of the image, and this was very much a product of the community engagement work that we did. The building lifts up off the ground, and it does that for a couple reasons. One is to provide visibility to the rear of the site, which was a concern of local residents in terms of public safety. But also it eliminates, what could potentially be vacant ground floor retail space. So again, just this idea that what we've outlined in these concepts, has really been tested and tried to be understood through the lens of market feasibility. And the other thing that uh, market feasibility showed us is that development here would likely have to be subsidized, and so the city is really prepared to bring, or as DPD, I should say, is prepared to bring our full suite of incentives to these projects, and that includes everything from adopt a landmark for, in this case, the landmark building, to the neighborhood opportunity fund, to tax increment financing, and new market tax credits. Another thing to note is that we've worked in close coordination with our Department of Housing to uh, gain an understanding and essentially provide an allocation of uh, potentially tax credits that could be used for these developments as well. Um, and one of the things that another one of the things that's unique about the way that we're approaching this RFP is really the idea of how we're evaluating the responses, and the uh, particularly the criteria for community wealth building. And this is something that we heard certainly through our community engagement process, but also is certainly a priority of this mayoral administration in our department. But how do we promote not just short-term community wealth building, but long-term community wealth building beyond just job creation, but actual ownership and and equitable control of these sites. And so that's something that we're going to be looking to these development proposals to essentially propose. How we can bring local ownership and partnership into these projects in a very meaningful way is certainly something that we're looking for, and a high priority for our department. And that means moving beyond just subcontractors and meeting your basic MBE WB requirements, but really being intentional and meaningful in how we address equity here. Um, the selected respondent also, we'll be looking for a track record of working and making investments in the south and west sides of Chicago, or other communities like it, and as well as a track record of collaboration and support from local community organizations and other key stakeholders. And along with that is, the more typical evaluation criteria, which is, there's got to be a level of professional and financial competence and feasibility that we'll be looking at as part of the evaluation of these proposals. Um, and one other thing that is really a priority for our department, and that we'll certainly be looking at, is design excellence. And we've set out to really put together a design excellence strategy for all work that we review and that comes out of our department. And one of the things that we've done in partnership with the Chicago Architecture Center is a list of pre-qualified design services firms. There are 32 firms that were vetted by an independent jury um, across Chicago that really reflect the diversity of the city, and as well as the range of design skills that firms in the city bring. And so this is a resource to potential development teams, to potential respondents to this RFP, to utilize and to ensure that your proposals are going to meet a high level of design excellence. And along with that, again, as part of this larger strategy, um, we do have are design excellence principles, which are included in the RFP addenda material, and are available to as part of the download, along with the pre-qualified list of designers. And really, these principles are our initial attempt to define what design excellence means. And it really goes beyond just architecture and aesthetics, but really down to process and encouraging inclusive design processes that foster equitable development. For example, is our first principle. Uh, and I'm sorry if I could go back. One other tool that is available and is also part of the RFP addenda now is our neighborhood design guidelines, which take these principles a step further and provide specific guidance on best practices for designing buildings on commercial corridors at a neighborhood scale. So really, all of these things are meant to be used as resources and tools for development teams responding to these RFPs. So, an overview of the RFP process and kind of what this looks like. So obviously, we released the RFPs in late August, and we're currently in step two, which we estimate to take about 3 months. During this time, the department will continue engaging our community stakeholders through our Invest Southwest roundtables. There's one for each. There's a roundtable for each corridor that meets monthly, and obviously we're having the pre-bid conference today, and we expect proposals to come in November, November 24th, and so once that happens, hopefully everyone on this call will submit a proposal. Um, we'll move into our evaluation phase, which is really scheduled to take about a month and a half and take us through the month of December. And what the department will do is evaluate all of the proposals based on the criteria outlined in the RFP. We will generate a short list, and then we will facilitate a presentation of the finalists to the community roundtables and allow community roundtable stakeholders to ask questions of the finalists and weigh in on the different proposals. And then after that, in early 2021, we expect to have a developer selected for this site. And just to give you a sense, we talked about, or I talked about this idea of a steady cadence um, of RFPs on a quarterly basis. So obviously, the August RFPs are out. In November, we're looking to do another set of RFPs, and then in February, and then in May. And really, these are potentially subject to change, but just to give folks a sense of the cadence of opportunities that is to come, as well as kind of the timelines that we're looking for. We really see all of these projects being under construction in 2022. And so with that, we're going to open up uh, um, the conference for questions and answers. So I've got the Q&A chat box open. As I mentioned earlier, I will be moderating and my colleagues will be chiming in with answers. And if someone, if you feel like you'd like to create more of a dialogue, feel free to raise your hand and we'll try to call on you to answer some of these questions. So I see one coming in now. Are there existing drawings of the Laramie Bank building that can be shared? Will there be a tour of the building? And Ethan, I'm going to ask you to chime in on this one.
Kind of architectural drawings or schematic drawings? No, not that I think I've seen any time in recently in the department. We do have a couple interior photos, but those are in the RFP document. I don't believe our current plan was to create a tour of the building as a privately owned site. It's a little bit challenging for the city at this time.
Thank you, Ethan. I think the next one might be one that you should weigh in also. So how will the city guarantee or facilitate the sale of private property? Are there any guarantees that the cost of the property will not unnecessarily rise due to interest of the Invest Southwest initiative?
So yes, I can take that. Yeah, the has been in constant communication with the two property owners of the Laramie State Bank site, who do prefer a private, who are both motivated to sell. Given that the city's preference is to facilitate a private transaction between these private property owners and the private proposal or developer. Given that the city does have acquisition authority that was required to RFP these properties, that can be used by the city to acquire these properties if the property owners become kind of unduly challenging towards the process or towards facilitating a deal. Again, that's not our preference or first priority, but it is an option if there's any challenges in a private transaction.
Great. Thanks, Ethan. Another question, has a phase one ESA been conducted at the Austin site? And if so, will the results be shared? Ethan or someone from AIS?
Yeah, no phase one has been conducted as a privately owned site for the extent of its existence. The city has never conducted a phase one on this private site. So, and they have not, so no.
Thank you. When are the monthly roundtables and where are they held? Ethan?
Sure.
Sorry.
Ethan Laster again. Given the current pandemic, as you're all familiar, the roundtables are virtual. They are a Zoom meeting. So the roundtables, it's a certain continual pattern for this Austin community. They're the third Friday of each month. And if you want to be included in those, please email dpd@cityofchicago.org and we can add you to that conversation.
Great, thanks, Ethan. I can take the next one. Can you elaborate on the process behind the recommended pre-qualification of the design firms and how that contributes to an inclusive process? With only 32 firms selected out of the 200 who submitted, it seems to have done the opposite and excluded many. So what I can say about the process is that, the brief was very clear on the parameters of qualifications that would be reviewed by the jury, and the 32 firms that were selected in the opinion of the jury met those qualifications, and really achieve a high level of design excellence in their portfolios, as well as in the kind of aspects of working in communities like the South and West sides of Chicago. There was a lot of work that got put into formulating that brief and distributing it, and we were really not overwhelmed. We were really excited to see the amount of interest that it generated. That being said, it's not a requirement of any development team to use a firm on that list. Certainly, there are opportunities for other firms to participate in this development process. But again, these were firms that, in the jury's opinion, met all of the qualifications of the brief, and could provide these services and execute these projects at a high level. So we have a question. Why is the timing so short to submit? Community developers need time to determine partnerships, funding, etc. Is there some flexibility on timing? And Chris, I'm gonna look to you to answer that. And if this is something that maybe we need to answer after the session, just let me know.
Sure. This is Chris Jang. Good afternoon, everybody, first of all. So we've discussed how much time we would allow for the proposal to be submitted. And we felt that 3 months was ample time for developers to sort of determine partnerships, figure out funding, etc. And the RFP document, as Geraldo mentioned, are is pretty different from what we used to release in the past. So it does provide some, pretty good idea on what the design should look like. Not that it should, the development should kind of follow that exact footprint and massing. And also we provided some resources and ideas on how the gap might be closed on financial side. So we're hoping that we are making things easier for the developers to figure out this development. But we can definitely talk about this off the air within Department of Planning to see if we need to allow additional time. But at this point, we are sort of looking for proposals to be submitted by November 24th until we change that date and extend that further.
Thanks, Chris. So we have another question. Is there an idea of the price for the property? And assuming that means, well, the entire, all of the property. Ethan, is that one that you can answer?
Sure. Again, no, there's not a specific price in mind, but both owners have expressed a lot of willingness to sell. Obviously, price somewhat reflects current conditions of the building as well as whatever is proposed. So as a developer, kind of a residual land value analysis may be helpful for that. But there's not a set price as of this moment, but we don't, given the condition of the site, we don't expect acquisition or sale price to be a very large portion of the budget or capital stack.
Thanks, Ethan. Are the properties occupied? If so, will they be exempt from the city's new rules requiring advance notice and payment to current residents? And I believe the answer to that is no, the properties are currently vacant. Can you confirm that, Ethan?
Correct, they are vacant.
So next question is there a record or summary available of previous community discussions, for example, Invest Southwest roundtables related to the project? Ethan?
Yeah, so a couple of elements to this. Roundtables are posted on Chicago DPD's YouTube channel, so you can find those for previous iterations. A form of a record of what was discussed by the community is the development framework plan for Chicago Avenue, which is included in this RFP addenda. That again was part of what Gerardo showed, material produced by the pro bono CCAC team, but that does kind of collect all of the decision-making created over the summer.
Thanks, Ethan. Is it expected that a respondent reach out to the property owners in advance of submission to negotiate a price or sale? Chris, are you able to answer that, or Ethan?
I think Ethan can probably answer this also, but I would think that it is our expectation that the respondent should reach out to the property owners, at least to start that conversation. And that would definitely help kind of figuring out the financial stack, as well as how much it's going to cost to potentially acquire that property and the willingness of the owners, the current owners, to sell the property to the respondent. So I would definitely encourage to reach out and potentially, kind of schedule a tour of the building if one needs to go in and actually take a look at the inside of the Laramie State Bank building. Ethan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers everything.
Okay.
Thanks, Ethan. So if the city has to use acquisition authority, how long would you expect that take to facilitate? Chris?
Yes, we do. We do have an acquisition authority for both properties. I should say the two set of the property owners for all of the properties here. We obviously don't want to exercise our acquisition authority to condemn, and we want the private transaction to happen between the private owner and the respondent. But if we need to kind of step in at a later date, if that private transaction doesn't happen, we would try to kind of facilitate it as soon as possible. There is really no way for us to kind of project how long that's going to take, but knowing that the sellers sort of expressed their interested in selling these properties, I don't think it's going to take a lot of time. But again, I mean, these legal proceedings are really difficult to kind of gauge as to how long it's going to take. But we would try to expedite it as fast as we can.
Next question is there a deadline for questions submitted after this pre-submission conference? Chris?
No, there's really no deadline for questions. But obviously, you would want to submit questions as early as possible so that you can kind of formulate there or count those answers into your proposal. So I would encourage everybody to submit their questions as soon as possible. So for your reference, we are going to put together all of these questions that come out from these previous conferences. We had one yesterday. We obviously have one today, and we will have another one tomorrow. So we would put all the questions and answers together and then post it on our website. I would think by Wednesday or Thursday of next week.
Great, thank you. Has the department set aside pre-development budgets for each site, phase one, design, etc.? Who is responsible for those costs? And oh, sorry, one second. Whoops. Let's answer that question. I lost it on my feed, but the short answer is no. There's no budget for pre-development, and those costs currently, the assumption is that would be covered by respondents to the RFP. Katie or Rohan from the mayor's office, is there anything else that we can share at this time regarding pre-development costs?
Yes, hi everyone. This is Katie Leone from the mayor's office. Actually, just today, the Chicago Community Trust launched a pre-development fund, which is an evergreen application for grants up to $100,000, specifically for pre-development costs, specifically for developments in areas like Invest Southwest. So this is quite relevant for these RFPs that the city has put out. So we encourage you to take a look at that, and we can circulate information about that after the fact as well. It's not associated with the city, although we obviously largely support that. We've also heard that there are other foundations that are looking at doing this as well, although nothing else official except for the Chicago Community Trust. So we'll continue to post information about these things as we learn about them. But right now, that is the best source for those funds.
Thanks, Katie. Will zoning be through the PD process? Should we assume allowable density will resemble the plan shown? And the answer to both of those is yes. What we're presenting here, we assume might require some zoning changes, as well as the assumption that that could happen through a PD process. And so certainly the department would support it as long as it's consistent with what was outlined in the different development concepts. I just noticed Steve is on the line. Steve, anything that you'd care to add to that?
Well, no, I think, we're looking for density here according to what we've shown. And I think that we would have to wait until we see the bulk and density of the winning proposal and determine what the appropriate zoning is, and if they would require a plan development, or if they could elect to become a plan development. But yeah, it most likely would go through the plan development process.
Thank you. If the city has to choose between a JV between a developer and a recommended design firm, and a developer and a non-recommended design firm, who will the city choose? Um, I, I don't know. I mean, so again, a the pre-qualified list of designers are not a requirement for them to be used. Again, they were selected by an independent jury, and were determined to meet the criteria of the brief that was provided to firms and really bring a high level of capacity and design excellence to the table. That being said, they're not required, and so really we would um, evaluate each proposal on its merits. And if they were if a developer wanted to bring them a design firm on board as a joint venture, certainly would be interested at looking at that proposal and evaluating it. Who makes final decision on the developer? Roundtable. What is the process for final determination? Um, Chris, would you care to weigh in on this one?
I think it's a combination of the city and the community through the roundtable process. So we would obviously consult with a roundtable and the community asset holders about the few that we pick, the short list of projects that we're going to present at these roundtables. But once that roundtable is done and the presentations are made, then we would review those comments from the roundtable, and we would hopefully kind of do a little bit of a negotiation with the respondents to kind of reach a most ideal development project. And that's how I envision the final determination is going to be made.
Thank you. So we've got a question here. How can you use your eminent domain authority to condemn the property and then sell it to a private developer when state law specifically forbids that? Art, is this something that you can chime in here, or is this a question
Sure.
that? Okay,
Sure,
go
that's
for it.
fine. So state law does not prohibit it. It just has a different threshold of proof. A higher standard has to be met by the city in order to do it. In this case, we may not need to use condemnation authority. It's possible that the property owners will just enter into a negotiated sale with the selected respondent. It's also possible that they may just want to sell to the city without going through litigation. So either way, we'll be able to work things out so that this project can move forward.
Thank you. If respondents need to reach out to property owners to negotiate a price or sale prior to submission, does DPD have contact info for the property owners? Ethan or Chris, do you care to, can you chime in on that?
Yeah, Chris, correct me if you're thinking differently. I think it'd be helpful for the property owners if we don't overwhelm them. So perhaps the best route is to funnel things through DPD, so we can set up perhaps a contact through DPD, or just have anyone who wants to reach the property owners first email DPD at City of Chicago.
Yeah, and also, and I look to our law department to kind of chime in a little bit here. I don't know if you can kind of provide a private contact information to anybody who inquires, but I look for Arthur to maybe chime in on that a little bit.
So we can't prohibit anyone from contacting somebody else. They have the right to do that. It's America. But if you need to find out who owns the property, you could go to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds and possibly get the contact information that way. I don't know that it's our job to pass that out when we think that there may be a flood of calls going to the buyers, to the sellers, or the seller reps. It's more of a policy decision for the city, and if it's something that we decide is appropriate to do after discussion with the sellers, then we will do it.
So it sounds like there are ways to get in touch with these folks. We'll have to maybe circle back with them and see if they're okay with sharing their contact information.
Right. I mean, we want the developments to go forward, and we don't want to hinder a proposer. So if the seller is amenable to our providing their contact information, then, you know, that's what we'll do. It may be, instead of a phone number, I would envision just some sort of email address where people could contact the seller.
Right.
And that way they can wade through the emails and decide which to respond to.
Great. So it sounds like we can provide further clarity on this question
Yeah.
once we post them
Yep.
in writing. And the next question seems to be in the same vein. So I think we covered that. Will you share the names of today's attendees and a link to today's presentation? How and when would you share that info? Chris?
Yes, we will share. We can share the names of today's attendees, and we would put that up on our website along with the FAQs that we once we finalize that by, I would say, Wednesday or Thursday of next week. And I think this is this is on YouTube as well, so you can actually look at that presentation on YouTube. And I don't, Ethan, Kevin, do we have a link to that YouTube, or is that just a search on YouTube? Is that how one would get that?
I don't know if Kevin.
Sorry, I think
Yeah.
Kevin could correct me if I'm wrong. I believe every YouTube channel, if it's your username, is just youtube.com/ and I believe it's Chicago DPD. That's unconfirmed, I'll say.
Yeah, but we can, so you can either find DPD's YouTube channel on your own, or we'll be sure to send you a link to it with follow-up information. The next question, is there any local info about the Evergreen Co-op and the community trust?
I'll take this
Yeah.
and then actually, I believe, possibly hand it off. This came from kind of the community wealth building information and information in the addendum. Actually came from the mayor's office. So I don't know if Katie, if you have more to add. I guess there's still a question about any local info, what exactly the question means by that. But Katie, if you have more to add about the wealth building models.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is referring to the Evergreen grant application or if this is the community wealth information, but I'll try to address both. So for the Evergreen grant application that I mentioned before from the Chicago Community Trust, yes, that as I mentioned, that launched this week. We can share out the information after this call with the application for that, but it's via the Chicago Community Trust website. It's not city affiliated. We just, we understand it and support it, and it's very much aligned with the work that we're doing for Invest Southwest. On the wealth building side, which Ethan mentioned that there was some of that language in the RFP, and there were some appendices about it. What you saw in the RFP was a description of how the city views wealth building and how we've been thinking about it with our Office of Racial Equity within the mayor's office. And the relevance of that to these RFPs really comes in the form of the partnerships model that some of you may have seen in the evaluation criteria. And so what we've done as part of the evaluation criteria is asked that bidders actually form partnerships with community-based organizations, community-based developers, folks who are from the region or the neighborhoods that can actually be, a meaningful partner as part of your overall application and part of your overall team. The reason for this obviously is capacity building, it's shared knowledge and expertise from both partners that may be involved. But there's also this wealth building component, and we're really looking to do things a bit differently this time. We're looking to go beyond just subcontracts with neighborhood organizations, we are looking for neighborhood organizations that are represented by, our Black and Latinx residents who represent these neighborhoods to actually have meaningful equity stakes as part of the project. So you'll see more information about that in the evaluation criteria, and we gave a few examples within the RFP that are just meant to sort of stir some creative juices. They're not meant to exactly look like that. We do leave it up to the bidders to suggest how those partnerships are formed, and it'll be part of the evaluation. But it is absolutely a critical part of how we will be reviewing the bids.
Gerardo,
Yes.
it's Arthur. I just wanted to say that Kevin was correct. If you go to youtube.com/Chicago DPD, yesterday's presentation is already posted on there, and it has the current presentation is being shown live.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, are GCs required to be part of the development team during this stage? Is it more advantageous for a developer to propose with a GC? So I would say the short answer is no, it's not required. But I would point to perhaps thinking about this in the realm of Katie's response to equitable wealth building and being creative about how you put your proposal together to really show that you're forming meaningful partnerships that are ensuring that kind of short and long-term wealth building within the community. And so certainly, the construction set-asides, if you will, are a start to that. And if a respondent want to think creatively about how they put together a team or show that they've given that some thought, it's certainly something that we'd be able to evaluate based on the criteria in the RFP. The acquisition process will create a bidding war. The best course of action may be, well, that's not really a question, but I'll finish reading it. The best course of action may be the city to purchase the property. The next question is, how will the city ensure the team chosen is reflective of the community? Ethan or Chris, would you care to chime in, or even Katie here?
Well, I'll jump to real quick. The selection criteria and selection process are intended to, again and again, highlight that priority in selection is given to teams that do reflect the community. So again, if you don't have that, this will go in front of the community, and if they don't see themselves reflected in it, they don't have to vote for yours or choose yours or prioritize yours. So again, that's kind of the priority spelled out among the selection criteria and selection process sections of the RFP. But Chris and Katie, feel free to add a lot more nuance.
Yeah, I think that's right, Ethan. The only thing I would add is that, obviously there's, professional competence and financial viability and all the other, more standard evaluation criteria that are absolutely critical here as well, that the city will be reviewing and creating a short list. And then that short list will go in front of the community. And so, we do expect that the bids that make that short list do reflect what the community is looking for here, which is spelled out in the RFP that we've gathered through those roundtables. And then there will be the opportunity for the community to actually ask direct questions of the finalist group of bidders, if you will, and weigh in as well on that. Their feedback will be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I also just want to add that the RFP document actually includes a section about how the city is going to evaluate these proposals, and in that criteria, we're kind of focusing on the community wealth building and equitable development. So by just going by those criteria, I think we would be able to sort of reflect what the community wants, and the developer team actually kind of reflects what the community looks like. So, if you can kind of review the evaluation criteria and the process in the RFP document, so it kind of explains how we are going to proceed with that.
Thanks, Chris. Um, so, are you able to expand on the earlier Q&A regarding respondents individually reaching out to property owners to negotiate a sale price prior to the submission deadline? How does this factor into the evaluation process? Will the highest offer be advantage in this situation? Um, Chris or Art, is this one that you can chime in on?
We're going to use the evaluation criteria that are set forth in the RFP.
Okay.
So I think this is something that we need to kind of consider after this call and see how we might approach this. But in my opinion, and I know that we have our financial incentive division participating in Terrence Johnson, so he may be able to provide a little more input on this. But I would say that if we know that the respondent is paying too much for the property, then we obviously need to kind of take that into consideration and potentially talk to the property owner, the seller, to maybe adjust the price, because we definitely don't want to overpay for the property, and since we know the value of the property as is somewhat, so we definitely don't want to like overpay someone and provide a pitfall for something like that. So Terrence, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think to the point that was made earlier, it may be a conversation that we need to have internally in terms of, the efforts that the city may make, not so much that we acquire the property, but at least negotiate the price on behalf of the RFP, so that everyone's potentially coming from the same spot, as opposed to a number of folks reaching out to the developer or to the sellers individually. But that may be something that we need to talk through on that after the call.
And we can offer some more clarity on this
Yeah.
in the written response.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Terrence, I think this one may be right up your alley, so it's kind of good timing. How will the city evaluate the non-serviceable gap or funding assistance requested when choosing the winning bid?
I think the non-serviceable gap piece of it is just going to be one part of the evaluation criteria. Again, it's all about the feasibility of the project. If if the respondents come in with feasible projects and they can do that with less assistance from the city, of course, that may be seen favorably. But again, that's only one piece of it compared to some of the other selection criteria. But of course, the least the amount of incentives that the city has to provide will be looked at favorably.
Thank you. So one more question is, what is the value of the property as is? Ethan, do we have that information, or Chris?
It's a good question. I don't think we have a very recent appraisal, although we have a buildings department appraisal from a couple of years ago. I can pull that up, or we can send that out shortly, or we can respond in writing with that.
Okay, I think let's do that. Okay, I think did I see a hand up somewhere? Give me 1 second here. Or did that hand come back down? Oh, where'd it go? Give me 1 second so I can find it. I'm sorry, can whoever raised their hand do so again? I don't know if anyone else on the panel can see who raised their hand and maybe allow them to speak, but I don't, I can't see that hand anymore.
I don't see anyone right now.
Okay,
Same.
okay. Oh, the question came up. I'm on the Invest Southwest website, but do not see the posted information from yesterday's presentation. Please advise. Chris or Kevin?
It's on the YouTube channel, not the Invest Southwest website. The presentation from yesterday is on the YouTube channel, not the Invest Southwest website. Although, perhaps, yeah, we want to link to YouTube from our website more often, but I'll let Kevin handle that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and also if you're looking for questions and answers from yesterday's pre-conference, that we would actually put all of that together and post it online on our Invest Southwest website next week, Wednesday or Thursday next week.
Thanks, Chris. So here's a couple more questions that are coming in. How can we put together a projected capital stack when there are no clear specific commitments from the city via TIF and tax credits? I am reading projected types of support, but not specific numbers. Is there a table or spreadsheet with specific capital support from the city? Ethan or Terrence?
Terrence, feel free to add, but I would point out in the RFP, we showed a capital stack and showed a non-serviceable gap. The point being that we believe we can fill that non-serviceable gap shown with the city incentives that we also spelled out. You're right that we did not match those incentives in a dollar figure to that service gap. But essentially you can show just a non-serviceable gap. You don't have to spell out how much you think will come from each incentive program. That's kind of the city's role, but it's more about what is that gap? What is that number?
Right. And just to add on to that, Ethan, too, that's part of the competitive process here as well. As mentioned before, just because that's the gap that we are showing does not mean as the respondents pull their projects together that, someone may have a gap less than that, or some may have a gap more than that. So it's all part of the process. So we didn't want to get out ahead of that process in terms of prescribing incentives to those gaps.
Thank you both. This next question isn't entirely clear to me. How about the attendee list then? Just because we've had other variations of this question, I'm going to assume it means will the attendee list be shared? And Chris, can you chime in on that?
Yes, again, the attendee list will be posted on our website next Wednesday or Thursday.
Thank you. So one other question is, it seems that the number of unknowns regarding the financial challenges and markets for the project site, including private property purchase and undefined incentives, will make it challenging for teams to create equally footed financial proposals. Shouldn't this process be an RFQ to select the team with whom the city will work on developing a viable project? Chris, care to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good question, and I don't really have an answer for at this point. So we can discuss internally and post an answer later on.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the editorials aside, it sounds like, would we consider an RFQ process? And so we can certainly answer that question in writing.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, Chris, can you just take a couple minutes to recap our next steps for folks, and how we intend to proceed over the next few weeks here?
Sure. So we are going, as I stated during the previous conference, we are going to post all of the questions along with answers to those questions on our website. Hopefully by next Wednesday, and at the latest next Thursday, along with the list of attendees to these previous conferences. As you know, the proposals are due on November 24th, and we will spend month of December and early part of January potentially to sort of review and evaluate based on our evaluation criteria. We would select a few shortlist proposals and bring those proposals back to the community roundtable, and kind of incorporate those feedbacks from the roundtable before we finalize or finally fully renegotiate the proposal. And then we hope to select a winner sometime in early 2021, either February or March, before we take that project through the legislative process, which would include Community Development Commission approval, Chicago Plan Commission approval, as well as Chicago City Council approval.
Great. So thank you all again for taking time out of your afternoon to join us. Again, proposals are due November 24th. Looking forward to seeing all your proposals, and to really being part of something that we at the department feel is going to be transformative and really impactful for this community. So thanks again, and we will be in touch.